The very, 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 very nice, very fancy house that you see here is at the center of a very infuriating story. The family that owned this house, the big one there with the trees and the patio you can see, this is an uber-exclusive Malibu colony in Southern California. And the family that owned this house reportedly lost everything in the Bernard Madoff Ponzi scheme. They had refinanced that home with Wells Fargo Bank, which you might recall received $25 billion of our collective taxpayer dollars last year as part of the financial bailout. After this family that thought it was very rich ended up financially devastated by Madoff, Wells Fargo foreclosed on this family's home. Then, one of its own executives moved into the house. According to the Los Angeles Times, a Wells Fargo senior vice president who's responsible for foreclosed commercial properties this summer started using the $12 million beach house for long weekends with her family and to throw lavish parties, including one in which guests were ferried onto the property by yacht. Yes, the bank executive was living in and partying in the house the bank kicked a family out of so it could foreclose on it, presumably to sell the property in order to recoup its debt, not to provide a feast of carrion for its own vulture executives. Well, today, Wells Fargo announced that it had fired the executive in question, but not before giving America a whole new reason to resent, fear, and feel disgusted by an industry that has swallowed more public money in the last year than any in history. Today, on the one-year anniversary of the Wall Street collapse that both signaled the financial system crisis and started the round of bailouts that both the Bush and Obama administrations carried out, on the one-year anniversary of John McCain nevertheless proclaiming that the fundamentals of our economy are strong, which as much as any other thing helped then-candidate Obama portray McCain as clueless on economic issues. Today, on the anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers, President Obama went to Wall Street to make the case for tightening regulations.
I want everybody here to hear my words. We will not go back to the days of reckless behavior and unchecked excess that was at the heart of this crisis, where too many were motivated only by the appetite for quick kills and bloated bonuses. The old ways that led to this crisis cannot stand. And to the extent that some have so readily returned to them, underscores the need for change, and change now. History cannot be allowed to repeat itself.
The government has already given the financial firms ungodly sums of cash. Now the president says he wants new Wall Street regulations, and he wants Wall Street to not fight those new regulations. Wouldn't we have had a lot more leverage for something like this if we'd done it, say, a year ago? Joining us now is Elizabeth Warren, chair of the TARP Congressional Oversight Panel, which oversees the $700 billion bank bailout. Professor Warren, thank you for coming back on the show.
Oh, it's good to be here.
President Obama called for what they're saying is the most ambitious overhaul of the financial regulatory system since the Great Depression. Do you agree with his overall approach?
I do. I think he's got it right, because at its heart, there's one clear message from the president, and that is no matter how much money we pump into these financial institutions, until we change the rules that brought us to this crisis, we are not safe.
Do you think that the specific rule changes that he's advocating are legislating to fix the last crisis, or do you think they are sufficiently broad and, I guess, far-sighted to prevent the next one?
Well, I think he's looking for structural change, and that's what's key. He starts it at the household level. Let's always remember, this crisis began one family at a time with lousy mortgages and bad credit cards that then got bundled and traded, provided the raw material to create these high-risk products that the investors traded back and forth and created such chaos. So he starts there with structural change, with a new consumer agency, and he follows it all the way through and says there's got to be structural change up and down the line. And in terms of its broad outlines, I think that's right.
The consumer financial protection moves, we talked about the last time you were on this show, and the reason that we talked about it then is because it seemed quite clear that those consumer financial protections, which make so much sense, both for the structure of our economy and for just our individual financial lives as Americans, those were target number one of the financial services industry, that they really wanted to kill these new consumer financial protections. How are they doing in their efforts to kill it?
Well, they've put a lot of money into that, and they've put both long-term money. Let's remember that the financial services industry has given about $500 million to Washington in campaign contributions over the last 2 years. But they're also doing it on a very intense line-by-line basis. The Chamber of Commerce has just done its own Harry and Louise ad. They've committed a couple of $1 million to get an ad out there to tell consumers why they will be so much better off if they don't have anyone in Washington watching out for their interests.
When we look at the overall lobbying and policy landscape here, it seems pretty clear what's happening on the other side. Those types of ads that you described, though, that amount of campaign donations, which is incredible, we sort of know that they're going to be pushing to keep the seatbelt rules off of them, to be able to keep doing what they've been doing, which has frankly worked so well for them, particularly when they get bailed out, when their risk piles up and they lose. Who's on the other side of it? The president today did take a little bit of a bully pulpit on it, going to Wall Street and saying this stuff needs to be done. Who else are his allies?
You bet. Well, there's the president, and that's probably the best ally you could look for right now. But there are a lot of folks in the Senate, Chris Dodd, Senator Durbin. There are a lot of people, Senator Reid, who've been very strong on the consumer side of this. And also in the House, Barney Frank. There's a fighter to have on your side who says he's going to push for it. And frankly, just a lot of good people. You know, let's face it, if this is going to be a story of lobbying dollars against lobbying dollars, the consumers are not going to win in this. Ordinary families don't have the kind of lobbying power in Washington. But what they do have is they have their numbers, and right now they have their anger. They sent $700 billion to these big financial companies, basically on not much more than Secretary Paulson saying, write me a blank check. And they did it, and they swallowed to try to preserve this financial system. But I think they expect something in return, and that is a financial system that's ready to say, okay, we've got to have some reforms, we've got to have some changes, and some of those changes need to be good for the American family.
Elizabeth Warren, chair of the Congressional Oversight Panel on TARP, and a very clear thinker and clear speaker on what are intimidatingly complex issues sometimes. Thanks so much for making time for us tonight.
Thank you.